It's an extreme example, but I want to bring it because it's a way of introducing our subject for this evening. There was a woman who came to see me asking me to evaluate her 8-year-old son. Now, normally I expect to meet with both parents when I evaluate a child, but the father was a bit of a workaholic, so he wasn't able to come to the session, and maybe that was part of the reason the child was having difficulty. In any event, the mother came to ask me to evaluate the child, and I was meeting with her to get some background information. So she told me that her concern was that her son seemed to be behaving okay at home, but in yeshiva, the Rebbe was telling her that he just wasn't getting with the program. He was marching to a beat of a different drummer. He seemed to have his own agenda, and she was afraid that if it's starting like this when he's 8 years old, Chalila B'chas, when he becomes a teenager, she could be one of the statistics of a kid off the derech. So I asked her if he could give me an example of what she's talking about. How does this manifest itself, that the child seems to be doing his own thing? She said, well, I'll give you an example. She said, he'll come home after yeshiva, and he'll walk in the door and he'll ask me, what's for supper tonight? So I'll tell him what I'm planning to serve. And if he's not happy with what I'm planning to serve for supper that night, he'll go upstairs, change into his Shabbos clothes, come downstairs and ask him where he's going. And he says he's going out. Around the corner from where we live, there's a chassan hall. And it's so busy that there's practically a chassan every night. So if he's not happy with the supper that I'm planning to serve that night, he's going to go out to the chassan hall, around the corner, go to the smorgasbord and help himself. So I'm really concerned about him. Well, this is an extreme example of what we would call independence. And that's really our subject for this evening. Raising independent children. Now, I don't want to leave you with a cliffhanger, in case you're wondering what happened to the boy. I did evaluate him. There was no depression, no rebelliousness, no anxiety. And he seemed like a pretty normal child, but a little bit more independent than most. I told the mother I didn't think she had anything to worry about. If she had concerns as he was growing up, she should let me know. But otherwise, I didn't think her worries were founded, and he's going to be a little difficult to get through the educational system. But once he's an adult, I think everything's going to be fine. Now, I haven't heard from them in a long time, although not too long ago, I did meet this fellow on the way to shul, and he was walking with his children to shul Shabbos morning, and I said to myself, well, I guess I gave the right advice, and he certainly did not go off the derech, chas v'shalom. We talk about independence. There's a pasuk in Chumash that I want to start with this evening, and that is in Parshas Bereishis, after Kadosh Baruch Hu creates Chava, brings it to Adam. The pasuk says, "V'yomer Adam, Zos apam." This time, after he was searching among all the animal kingdom for a mate and didn't find one, the Kadosh Baruch Hu created Chava from his rib. Zos apam etzem me'atzamai. This is a bone from my bones. Ubasar me'bsarai, a flesh from my flesh. L'zosi kara isha. This should be called a woman. Ki me'is lukacha zos, because she's taken from a man. And then the pasuk says, next pasuk, Al kain, therefore, Yazov ish es oviv es imo. A man should abandon his father and mother. V'davak be'ishto, and cling to his wife. V'yu levasar echad, they should be for one flesh. Now I heard on this pasuk two very embarrassing questions from Reb Meir Wikler Shlita. Why do I call them embarrassing questions? Because when you hear these questions, you're going to feel embarrassed. How come they didn't occur to you when you read this pasuk so many times? We learn it every year. Listen to the questions that Reb Meir Wikler asked. He said, first of all, the word Yazov means to abandon. That's a very strong language. A person gets married, he leaves his his childhood home. But why does the Torah have to use the word abandon, yazov? It's a very strong expression. And secondly, why does the pasuk begin al kain, therefore? What's the connection between the first pasuk and the second? What's the therefore? So Reb Meir Wikler explained beautifully. He said that when Adam Harishon was introduced to Chava, and she was going to be his wife, and he felt such a tremendous closeness to her, and such a connection to her, and he realized that this situation, that she was actually originally part of his body, physically part of his body, before she was created into a woman, will never exist again in the rest of human history. And therefore, as a result of this connection that he has, is going to be unique. No one else is going to have this. So how then will a husband and wife be able to achieve a successful shalom bayis? And then Adam Harishon said, Rashi says this, Ruach HaKodesh says this, Al Kain, therefore, since Adam Harishon is the only one who's going to have this unique relationship with his wife because they were originally one, therefore, in order for other couples, future generations, to have proper shalom bayis and closeness, yazov ish es oviv imo, that it's going to require a certain abandonment of the parental home in order to have a successful marriage. So I think, Rabbosai, what we see from this pasuk is that in order to have a successful shalom bayis and a successful marriage, it's necessary for a child to achieve proper independence before he gets married. Now, a person might think, well, that's his responsibility for himself to achieve independence. How do I know that it's the parental responsibility to teach independence to their children, to help their children become independent? So for that we need a brisa in Masechta Kedushin, Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph. The brisa says as follows: Tana Rabbanan, Av Chaye B'Beno, a father is obligated to perform certain responsibilities for his child. L'moilo, to give him a bris milah. Child can't do that for himself. The father has to do that. Lifdoso, to give him a pidyon ben. That's a father's responsibility. A child at 30 days old, the 31st day, can't do it himself. L'lamdo Torah, to teach him Torah. Child can't teach himself Torah. These are things that the father has to do for the child because the child can't do it for himself. And then the brisa continues and says, Ulasio Isha, and to marry him off. That's the father's responsibility. Ulamda Umnus, to teach him a trade. V'yesh Omrim, and some say, Af Lashito B'mayim, even to teach him how to swim. Now these last three items, to get married, to learn a trade, to learn how to swim, are all, what they all have in common is that they are all necessary and important steps to becoming independent. Now, I think from this brisa we see that it's the parent's responsibility to help the child become independent, to learn independence, in order to be independent, to have a successful marriage. That has to begin, the chinuch of independence has to begin much earlier, at a much early age. And just to illustrate how important that is, I want to cite another case example from my practice. Parents came to see me, both, in this case, it was a husband and wife, mother and father came to see me, about an 11-year-old boy. This 11-year-old boy, not misbehaving, and was doing well in yeshiva, was paying attention. He was getting fairly good grades. The concern the parents had was that the boy didn't seem to be Ma'ur ben Abrius. What does that mean? That means the Rebbe reported at PTA that when all the other boys are playing and jumping around during recess, having a good time, he's kind of sitting off by himself. Doesn't seem to have the confidence to get into the games. And he's sort of by himself, and doesn't seem like he's happy doing that, like he'd like to be more involved and more assertive. And the Rebbe was concerned about it. called it to the parents' attention. And the parents were very conscientious parents and wanted the best for their child. They thought they should have the child evaluated, so they brought him to me for an evaluation. Well, when I met with the parents initially, at the initial consultation, I was trying to get some background information to try to see if we could figure out what may be causing this. This seemed to be a rather recent problem. When he was younger, he did seem to play with other children and seemed to enjoy their company. And it was just lately that he seemed to be maybe a little bit withdrawn, or again, not Maariv ben Abrius. So I was asking the parents if they know if he had ever been abused in any way. They said no, wasn't abused. Maybe he's being bullied. He asked the Rebbe if he's being bullied in the class. Maybe he's intimidated by some of the other classmates. No, as a matter of fact, they even asked about that. And the Rebbe said, no, it wasn't being bullied at all. And the Rebbe would know. He's on top of the class and follows the interactions, and he didn't feel that the child was being bullied. I said, well, was there a sudden change in the family, something traumatic? Was there a move? Was someone nifter? Was there an illness? I was trying to get an idea. Well, how does this child deal with other frightening things as a child, have phobias or fears of other things that may be holding him back? No, it didn't seem to be afraid or anything, or fearful of anything in particular. So I was groping in the dark, trying to get some idea as to where this problem should be coming from. You have some idea even before I met the child, what may be some of the factors involved here. So as I was groping, I said, well, let's say there's a thunderstorm, and there's loud thunder in the middle of the night. So does your son wake up crying? Does he run to your room for support and comforting? There was a silence. Mother and father looked at each other, and it looked like they were questioning whether they should tell me something. And I waited, and then the mother said, well, he doesn't run to our room because he's already in our room. I said, what do you mean he's already in your room? Why would he be in your room before the thunderstorm starts? She said, no, he sleeps in our room. I swallowed hard. I said, he sleeps in your room? I said, let me get this straight. You have an 11-year-old son who sleeps every night in your bedroom? The father kind of looked at the floor. He was a little bit embarrassed about it. The mother was very indignant. She said, yes. She said, listen, I know children are supposed to have their own room and all that stuff, but don't start with me on that. She says, I tried. He cried every time. I couldn't take it anymore to hear his crying, and we just let him sleep in our room, and I can't fight with him anymore. And before I had a chance to say anything, the mother added, and I don't want to get into this with you because I'm not discussing it. He's in our room, he's staying in our room, and that's it. We just want you to evaluate him. I said, I don't think I have to go any further to evaluate this child to understand where this is coming from. If he's sleeping in your bedroom at 11 years old, how can he have the confidence that he needs in order to be Maariv ben Abrios? The mother said, well, this is not negotiable. She said, I'm not willing to put up with his crying. I can't take it. We'll discuss other things, but I don't want to discuss this any further. And she put the lid on the subject, and that was it. Closed. And the husband gave me a look to say, you can't fight City Hall. So we went on to other subjects. I said, I guess we'll have to leave it at that, because if you're not willing to accept my recommendation, then I don't see any purpose for me going any further with this evaluation. And I considered it chalked up as to one of the failures that I had in my practice, and we ended the session. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from the father. He said to me, listen, you had given us instructions what you thought we should do to help him learn to sleep in his own bedroom, and my wife didn't want to go any further with that, and she stopped you and interrupted you. I just want to ask you one question. I said, oh, what's that? He said, my wife wasn't willing to do this, and I couldn't, as you saw, I couldn't really oppose her on this. But she's spending a week in Florida, visiting her mother next week. And I was wondering, is this something that I could do while my wife is away, or doesn't it pay for me to try to work on this with my son while my wife is away? I said, are you kidding? This is a golden opportunity. If your wife isn't at home and you could teach your child, I think you can succeed in the week to learn how to sleep in his own bedroom. I think it can make all the difference in the world. You should go for it. But please let me know what happened. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, the father called. He says, I want to come to see you with my wife. They came in together. And he wanted to report to me in person what had happened. His wife did go to Florida. She planned to visit her mother. She spent about a week there, 10 days, whatever it was. I don't remember exactly. And during that time, the father succeeded in getting his son to learn how to sleep in his own bedroom throughout the night without coming into the parents' bedroom. And the parents wanted to thank me for the advice that I had given them. But more importantly, they wanted to tell me that they had just spoken with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, he really can't understand it. He said, he knows that he had given some what could be considered negative information at the PTA meeting, but he realized he must have been mistaken, and he wants to sort of retract the assessment that he had given of their son, because lately, at recess, he seems to be engaging with the other boys. He seems to have more confidence, and they don't know. He doesn't know if it's something that was just temporary, or something that the parents have done, or maybe something the Rebbe did. He's not sure, but he just wanted to give the parents a report that the last few days he's noticed that the child has totally changed and is very much Maariv ben Abrius in the class. So the parents didn't explain what happened. They just thanked the Rebbe for calling, and they wanted to share that with me in person, and I very much appreciated their coming in to give me that positive feedback. You know, I have a close friend and colleague whose son was learning in Ney Yisrael, and he lives in Brooklyn. And after a couple of years being in Beis Medrash, the son asked his father if he could borrow his car, because it was after Ben Torah and he had to bring some things to the dormitory, and he wanted to drive to Baltimore. Father said, okay. He had been driving for a couple of years, although he had never driven on the highway for such a long distance. But the father said, okay. And the son, and I think one of his chaverim, drove down to Ney Yisrael, the newsman. So that day, one of my colleague's neighbors came up to him and said, hey, I heard your son took your car and drove all the way to Baltimore. That's what my son told me. My friend said, yes, that's true. He says, aren't you worried? Your son is going to be on the highway, such a long trip, driving by himself. Aren't you worried? My friend said, of course I'm worried. He said, why'd you let him go? I would never let my kid go such a long trip on a highway by himself. He'd have to have much more experience before I'd let him drive on the highway that far. My friend said, listen, I'm a parent. I have a right to be worried if my son is going the first time on such a long trip on the highway. But just because I'm worried, that doesn't mean I should stand in the way of my child developing the necessary independence. So I can be worried. That's for me. But that shouldn't interfere with my allowing my son to do what he needs to do in order to develop independence. So Rabbosai, the takeaway from this evening, from our Vaad tonight, is that we see from the Pasuk in Bereshis that the Torah feels independence is very, very important for success in family life. And from the Bryce and Kedushin, we see that it's the parent's obligation to help the child develop the necessary independence. And from the examples that I tried to share with you from my practice, we see how important it is that parents help their children to develop necessary independence from an early age, because it's not something that's done at the last minute just before the chuppah. It's something that has to take place throughout a child's growth and development. And hopefully B'ezras Hashem, if we're encouraging our children to develop a healthy independence, then they will succeed in developing the necessary independence to have successful marriages and build their own Bayis Ne'eman B'Yisrael. So the next Vaad is going to be October 15th, Sunday night, and that's going to be Isru Chag. So I want to wish you all a good shiur, a Gemar Chasima Tova, and a good Yom Tov, and hope we'll see you all back again in B'ezras Hashem, Sunday night, October 15th.